Hey, ladies and gentlemen, first off, let me say Happy New Year's, and I wish everyone great health and financial prosperity in this upcoming year. To start the new year off, I want to deal with a topic that affects a lot of people around the world, that being mental health. Mental health is a major component in being ultimately free. It's one of those topics that I know we're going to visit frequently because I believe more people should be privy to this type of information. In this podcast, my wife and I are having a conversation with a certified high school counselor and mental health therapist by the name of Philip Wells. So without further ado, let's go ahead and drop that intro.
Welcome to the Ultimate Freedom Podcast. Ultimate Freedom Podcast. Uncensored, unrestricted. He talks about whatever, whenever, and however he wants. Your host, Jamare Clarington. Boast Bakuma, baby. Let's begin.
All right, Philip, welcome to the Ultimate Freedom Podcast. Man, I'm glad to have you on. Me and my wife are going to be having this great conversation with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you went to school, what do you study, all that good stuff?
Definitely. And I appreciate you bringing me on. So my name is Philip Wells. I'm from Columbia, South Carolina, and I came down here about 2 years ago to pursue my dreams of being a counselor. And in terms of school, I went to a small liberal arts school called Winthrop University. That's in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And then I got my master's degree from Clemson University. So if you follow college football, you probably know of Clemson. And that's kind of like the route I decided to go to. It was really inspired by a lot of positive role models that I had in my life. They were all about trying to get me to get to that next level, whether it was professionally, personally, or even in my academics. So I decided to pursue my dream of being a similar light in someone else's life, such as being a school counselor, which is what I do now, but also I'm a therapist. And it just comes from always having a consistent Black male role model. And I realized that that's very rare to have nowadays. So I decided to go that route because I know it was very needed, especially for the youth nowadays. So now I live in Miami, living a dream. I have my private practice called the Players Coach LLC. And you can find it by Googling theplayerscoach.net. And you can find me on Instagram at theplayerscoach LLC.
Great. And what is one of the reasons why, because that's a very interesting name, why did you come up with the Players Coach?
Yeah. So the way I relate to the world and to a lot of things is through sports. For me, that's what got me through high school. And later on, I would find out that it was a way for me to cope with a lot of the stress or the pressures that I was dealing with as a young man. And when you think of all the famous athletes like Tim Duncan, Tom Brady, Deshaun Watson, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, one thing about them is they all had great coaches in their lives. They had someone that's going to get them to that next level. And I figured I can do that same thing for other people. And if you know anything about sports, you have coaches and then you have player coaches. And those player coaches are those guys or those coaches, they can get the most out of their players. They're very loyal to their players. They're the type of coach that's going to get the guys riled up. They're going to get them pumped for the game, and they're going to get them to perform at their highest level. So that's why I decided to call myself the players coach, because at the end of the day, just like an athlete goes to a coach to get physically fit, my clients come to me to become mentally fit. That's kind of the role that I take in their lives, into my clients' lives.
That's great, man. That's great, because definitely operating as a team. And I tell a lot of people that, therapy is needed for everyone. You need someone to talk to. You need someone to, give you good advice. And a lot of people don't have that, especially in the athletic realm. That's real big. Having that coach, as you alluded to, a lot of great athletes, a lot of athletes just in general have that coach that they can talk to and help them with a lot of family issues, personal issues, things of that nature.
Exactly.
One of the things that we were talking about the other day when we were on the phone, you brought up one of the things that I'm very interested in as far as how finances impact mental health. Can you elaborate on that for a little bit?
Yeah. And believe it or not, I'm going to try to hit the highlights because there's so much that goes into how your finances can impact your mental health. So to go in one specific realm, when you think about how stressful paying for something as like a medical bill. So if you don't know, one of the leading causes to homelessness or poverty or debt is through medical bills. And that's why it's such a hot topic every year when the president, or not every year, every 4 years when the presidential elections come around. It's all about, hey, how are you going to get medical care to those who need it? Because it's such a big issue, especially in Black and brown and minority communities. So when you think about the stress that people have when, let's say, they have to decide on whether to take their kid to the dentist or take them to the doctor, whatever it is, versus having to keep the lights on or having to pay the rent or putting food on the table. You know, that's a stress that a lot of people may encounter because they don't have the financial ability to choose between either or to choose both. So when you think about how important it is to have proper medical care, and even to go even further with people that do have jobs and have, let's say, dependents, as you call it, for every dependent that you put on your insurance policy, it costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money, especially if you work as a teacher. So when you start to think about little things like that, your finances can definitely impact your mental health, but also your physical health, because it can alter whether or not you decide to go to a doctor or how often you do go to the doctor. Mm-hmm. It's all about that preventative care. So if you don't have the finances to be on the preventative side, then you end up on the reactive side. And then the stress that comes with all of that can be very deteriorating. So that's kind of like how finances can impact your mental health, but also your physical health as well. And there's plenty more examples.
Well, I had a question. You mentioned that the finances impact mental health. How do you see this trickling down and impacting the kids that live in these homes? Outside of maybe they're not getting the preventive care, like you said, in some of those instances, but I'm just thinking about that mindset and then some of those habits. How does that begin to impact the kids in those homes?
Yeah. So for everyone that's listening, I want them to Google this. Google Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And basically the hierarchy of needs go from, on the basic level of the pyramid, similar to a food pyramid, you have things like safety, shelter, food, clothes, water. And then once you accomplish all those things, as you move up the levels, you begin to be able to attain things like love or self-esteem, confidence. And at the very top of the pyramid is self-actualization, basically meaning your ability to reach your full potential. So when you think about those basic needs and, you know, working in the education system, if students aren't able to hit or to get those basic needs such as food, clothes, shelter, it makes it very hard for them to learn in the school setting. So for a lot of them, if they don't have those financial securities, then it makes it hard for them to focus on things that, you know, a lot of people take for granted, such as education. And that in itself is a stressor in itself. You know, imagine coming from a place where, you know, you don't have food, or, you know, your lights are cut off, or you don't have a laptop to do your homework. So to do things like USA Test Prep, Achieve 3000. Right. So now you got to go to the library, or you got to try to squeeze it in before school, after school. And that in itself can be a stressor for a lot of kids as well. Mm-hmm.
And what are some of the steps that teachers can take, parents can take to ensure that their kids' needs are being met? Speak on that a little bit.
Yeah. So I think one thing that teachers, counselors, principals can do is try to bring in outside resources or create partnerships between different organizations within the community to come in and sponsor the school, provide different resources. So to kind of give you an example, I know at the school that we work at, we have somewhat of a relationship with Comcast, where Comcast comes in and they may help train the students or give the students information about how to how to get a job straight out of high school versus having to go to college if they can't afford it, or partnering with Broward College, getting them to come in and sit in with the students or inform the students of different programs that they offer at their campus that's not only offered to the college students, but also offered to the high school students as well. And also, I think some of the resources that kind of go unnoticed is our local resources, such as like the library. Nowadays, students don't really go to the library as much. It's something that they probably see, older people probably go to, or whatever the case it may be. And I just found this out, but you can actually get free tutoring through the library, through your phone or through your laptop, so virtually. Wow. And a lot of students, they don't know that. And all you need is a library card, and that's free. So it's all about trying to introduce them to the different organizations out there. And then I forgot to mention things like Boys and Girls Club or the YMCA, whatever the case it may be. I think it's more so about bringing in all those resources and then educating the parents about these free resources. So I think that's kind of how you go around like the financial barrier for a lot of students. But on the other hand, the toughest part is trying to get parents or students to show up to things like the PTAs or the night school events, whatever it is, because a lot of them are probably out working or they're out whatever it is. So I think that's a barrier in itself as well, trying to get more parents, students out to the schools to hear about these resources, because a lot of times the ones that show up are the ones that don't really need it.
So I've had situations where I've had a student say, my parent is not mentally healthy. His name's been like, what am I supposed to do? And it's like, what do you say? What do you say when, they bear the brunt of whatever chaos that's bringing to their lives because they're watching their parent go through modes of depression or sometimes suicide thoughts or attempts, cases like that, and just wondering, how do I navigate that? Because I'm living in a home that's mostly controlled by that parent. That's the environment I go home to. What do you tell them? Like, what can you say? What do you offer to assist them on navigating situations like that?
Yeah. And that's a difficult one, mainly because a lot of people still see it as taboo. So like seeing mental health being a thing that only crazy people do, or what society deems as crazy. They feel like, or they see that it's a sign of weakness, but also, like I said, it's something that only crazy people do, when it's not really the case. So what I think needs to happen, specifically with that kid, if they feel like they're in danger or their parents are in danger. So let's say they feel like at that point in time, their parent is on the fence or they're about to attempt suicide. One thing that they can definitely do is call either 911 or call the sheriff's department, or here in South Florida, specifically in Broward County, you can call the YES team for someone that's under 18, or you can call the mobile crisis unit for people that are over 18. And once you call them, they come out to the house and they do an assessment on the parent, the child, whoever it is, and they deem that they're at a risk, then they'll take them over to the hospital to get evaluated. Now, that's something that's in Broward County. It's 24 hours, 7 days a week. And it's a resource that a lot of people, even in the schools, a lot of people use. Now, let's say they're not quite at that point. What could happen, what I find to be, I would say, easier, well, not necessarily easier, but what's the word I'm trying to use? What I'm trying to say is the thing that kind of works the best is if the parent sits down and they talk to, let's say, another adult, and then they hear from another adult. Because if they hear from their child, they probably think, oh, like, what do they know? They just my kid,
right?
So I've had conversations with parents, with students about them seeing a therapist, about their family seeing a family therapist. And I always try to ease into that conversation by first using empathy. Empathy is kind of the great defense, or what I'm trying to say. It lowers their defenses. It's a great, what's the word I'm trying to use? There's a verb I'm trying to use. It's
a great vehicle for getting them to be open to the suggestion of, seeing a family therapist.
Kind of lowers their defense mechanisms.
It lowers their defenses. Yeah. That's what I was trying to say. It lowers their defenses. And then it makes that conversation a little bit more easier to be had versus if I come straight in there and say, hey, I think you guys need to see a therapist. Right off the bat, they probably be like, oh, what do you know? What are you trying to say?
Yeah.
So I think, and even that is where like having a counselor or a therapist to have that conversation with the parent it comes in handy. So using empathy in those types of situations definitely help.
That's great, man. What?
I had a second point. So, okay. You mentioned in one of your points about self-care that sometimes they get neglected. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how that's connected to finances?
Yeah. Definitely. So I'm real big on examples. So I'll use an example here. Let's say you don't have a salary job. Let's say your job is hourly. So let's say you work 35 hours a week, and you're getting paid, let's say $20 an hour, $15 an hour, whatever it is, and you're living paycheck to paycheck. When you're stuck in that cycle, living paycheck to paycheck, and you're working hourly, you can't necessarily afford to take off for a vacation. You can't necessarily take off for what we call a self-care day, which is a new concept I think a lot of people need to start to incorporate into their workplace. You don't need to just take off work because you're sick or you have a doctor's appointment or you have a dentist appointment. You can actually take off because you need a self-care day. You need a mental break. Taking a day off.
We call it mental health days.
A mental health day.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's a concept that we need to start introducing, especially in the corporate world. Especially in the corporate world. I think a lot of them could definitely benefit from taking a day off because you'll be surprised when you come back, you actually be more productive than if you didn't take that day off because now you have a fresh mind. You're ready to go. So when I think about things like that, things like not being able to take off, not being able to indulge in self-care because of your finances, I see it as unfortunately a cycle that a lot of people get trapped in, saying things like, oh, I can't take off or whatever the case it may be, or I can't afford to, let's be frank, I can't afford to eat healthy, which is in itself a little bit of a myth. You can eat a little healthy or healthier without breaking the bank. And that could be a form of self-care, treating yourself to something like that. Or let's say getting a gym membership. So for a lot of people, working out is a form of self-care. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you may not be able to afford a gym membership, which costs $25 a month, because that $25 a month has to go to, let's say, groceries or the light bill or something like that. So, yeah. So that your finances can definitely take a toll on how much self-care you can do. Are free things that you can do, but there's definitely a lot more things you can do if you can afford it. So.
And I would say, just coming from the financial sector, and whenever I'm dealing with people, helping them, purchase a home or getting ready to purchase a home, one of the things that I like to do is first help that client develop a budget. And creating that budget for a lot of people that come from a lower socioeconomic demographic, it's scary because now they're seeing exactly where their money is going and seeing exactly how much money they do not have, right? But a lot of times you'll find your vacation, you find your vacation in your coffee, right? So people are drinking coffee every day, going to Dunkin' Donuts every day or Starbucks every day, 5 times a week. By the end of the year, you spent $1,300 on coffee. There's your gym membership. there's your vacation.
Exactly.
And so I think if more people create their budget, they'll find it easier to manage their income, manage their expenses, and at the end of the day, help them with their mental health. Because if you have excessive credit card debt, excessive student loan debt, and you don't have a guide on how you're going to get out of that situation, it's going to be chaotic for you every single day. And we know what credit card debt does. It compounds itself every single month. And we're living in a debt society right now. And, that's why I push, like, hey, create a budget first. And then, as we spoke about in an earlier conversation, is, not just saving your money. You have to save your money to invest in something. You have to make your money work for it, work for you. Because as you alluded to, working that, if you're not on a salary job and you're working, hourly, or you living paycheck to paycheck, that cycle's not going to end if you do not do something about it. So we have to get people to understand the concept of money, understand the concept of trading your time for money or using your money to bring in more money. And I think those concepts are not often taught to people. And I know a lot of people that are depressed because they live in paycheck to paycheck. And with, I was listening to your podcast. One thing you were saying in your podcast about social media, people, looking at social media, they get caught in this world of make-believe.
Yes.
Everybody's living this lavish life. And I'm gonna tell you from experience, just dealing with people, helping people with credit repair, they're not living lavish. A lot of people using their credit cards and maxing it out to go on that vacation. And, then they come back and 6 months down the road, their credit's all messed up. And so, now I remember I was talking to a young guy and he had an Impala. He was paying like $600-700 for it because of his
a month.
Yes, because his credit was bad when he got it. And I'm like, he asked me, he's asking me, hey, if I give it back to him, is it a repo? They're not taking it from me. Like, that's a voluntary repossession. You're still going to show up on your credit report the same way.
Yeah.
You live up to your end of the contract. So, so I definitely understand just the mental aspect of finances, man. And I think that's, without looking up, I'm willing to say that's probably one of the main reasons why people are depressed in our society. Because of the finances.
Yeah. And there's a statistic that says 1 in 5 people suffer from a mental illness, but yet minorities are 20% more likely to suffer from mental illness than the average person. So I think that speaks to things like living in poverty, or the things that are happening in the courts, in the jails, such as Black men are, I believe the statistic is 1 in 3. It's likely 1 in 3 Black men will go to jail, or 1 in 4, something along those lines. There's a reason for that stuff. It all is related. It's all related. So when you think about people living in poverty, people living in the ghettos, people living in the hoods, not to mention the things that go on in the hood, but just the stressors of not being able to afford, the basic needs, and I already alluded to that stuff. That in itself is a stress, but then you start to think about the environment that they're living in. So when they say 1 in 5 people suffer from a mental illness, and then Black people or minorities are 20% more likely to suffer from that same mental illness, there's a reason, and it goes hand in hand. And I also wanted to say this while you're talking. We need to start looking at our mental health as an investment in itself. That's an investment that we need to start to put more dollars, more time, more effort into. I think right now we're doing a bad job of putting our dollars in what we call liabilities. So when you talked about that Impala, the $600 Impala, well, hey, that could have been, especially if he goes to a place that has a copay. So talking about him going to see a therapist, let's say he needed to see a therapist, that $600, they probably could have took him throughout the whole year. but instead he's putting that towards an Impala. You see what I'm saying? Or the idea that Black people are spending, or Black people are buying the most Mercedes Benzes, or whatever the case may be, versus putting those dollars into our mental health, but then also to the things like the property or the investments. So it goes hand in hand. You gotta invest in those two things, because if you don't, then one would definitely bring down the other. That being mental health on finances, or finances on mental health.
Yeah. And you said something earlier, especially with the eating, and I would I would say this. I would say this in times where I'm like really, really working around the clock, especially if I'm working on several loans and then coming from education system and then working on a loan and at the branch, and I may be at the branch about 9-10 o'clock some nights. But when I do that, those are the nights that I typically eat horrible. And when you're working 9 to 5, or when you, like most people are, and you're always on the road, by the time you get home, you're drained. And when you're drained and you're thinking about all the things that you have to, get accomplished the next day, don't make the best decisions, especially when it comes to your health. They say most of the diseases and most of our sickness is preventative, right? And that's one of the things that we need to begin to, put into our budget. Like I said, it doesn't cost that much to eat healthy. That is a myth. But I would say this, it does take a little more time.
It does. It does. It does. Yeah. And I would even say this, because this is something I'm trying to do, because I eat horrible as well. At least when I do go out to fast food, I try to get the most healthiest thing on that fast food list. So, it may start off from like, instead of getting the double cheeseburger, getting the chicken sandwich. Like that's at least a little bit more healthier. Then hopefully you'll start to transition to like eating at places like Bole, or getting a sub from like Publix or something like that. So something, it's still fast, but it's not, taking a toll on your body. So
yeah, I definitely want to do a podcast on foods that you eat on the go.
Yeah.
Be more conscientious of those fast, healthier choices. It seems like they're trying to make more things.
That's true.
I had an assignment one time where the students, they had to define poverty. And this one student, it was so interesting because she was saying, everything always well dressed, hair, nails, just always looking done up. And she was saying, you wouldn't be able to tell that we live in poverty, because that's one thing that, my mom makes sure we don't appear to be. She said, but I go home and there are no lights sometimes, but I'm gonna have this $300 hair. I'm gonna have my nails done. I'm gonna have all of these things. And it just when she said that, it just made me think that poverty has a different look.
Yeah.
And you can miss it. You cannot see it because it appears to be that you have everything you need because it's dressed up. It goes back, I don't know, to the statement about the Impala, but I wonder, what does that begin to communicate to this young person in terms of how do I navigate life?
Yeah. I think that's what we call affordable status. Things that you can afford to make your status look a certain way. And I definitely think so like the minority community, Black and brown community, we probably suffer from that the most. And, I think this even goes to, so like you probably see this a lot. You have people who do the same thing, but with their home. So that's when you refer to people being house poor. So like they have the big house, but they don't have any furniture in there, But they can't afford the lights inside the house because they decided to go buy that, that mansion versus, a simple house or a simpler house, So I think that ties into, again, the social media, but also the idea that I have to present a facade that people are going to accept. I think there are people who do a good job of not worrying about things like that, such as J. Cole. I know like every now and again you'll see him wearing, like a busted pair of Jordans, or, Tyler the Creator. Oh, and I would even say this. So if I were talking to that young lady, or if I were talking to your class, I would tell them, hey, I want you to Google Warren Buffett's house, or Bill Gates's house, and tell me what it looks like. And these guys are living in very like modest homes, I believe. Yet they're worth, $60 billion, it's like little things like that. Like, what are the wealthy of the wealthiest people doing with their money? And they're not putting it into like those liabilities, such as the clothes, the shoes, the cars. And unfortunately, I don't think there are enough people that they can relate to that are doing things like the Warren Buffetts of the world or the Bill Gates of the world. I even saw a picture on Instagram where I think Bill Gates was standing in line at a McDonald's, like ordering coffee, and like there was no crowd around him. He just looked like a regular guy, and I'm pretty sure he just hopped into a regular car and he sped off, and like that was it. So I think that's something that we need to be more cognizant of. But also, I know for me, and I'll encourage, that family or anybody else that gets caught up into that to ask themselves, what are their end goal? Or what's your end goal? And what do I mean by that is, what do you want your life to look like in 10, 20, 30 years? So I know for me, I want to be what you call partially retired by, let's say, age 40, 45, whatever it is. And the way for me to do that is through property, through investments, ETFs, things like that. So if I know that's my end goal, I know I have to make small daily sacrifices, such as not getting the iPhone 11, or not getting the AirPods or the Jordans, which that is my one weakness. But it, to a degree, you got to treat yourself, and that kind of goes again with the self-care. So like, even have enough money to kind of budget for those luxury items, when I do want them, okay, that's doable. But I know for now I have to make small sacrifices here and there in order to be financially free, which is what everyone's goal should be. But if you keep taking on these liabilities, it's going to push you back further and further. And then it's going to chain you to that 9 to 5 or to that salary or to that hourly job that you have, because now you have to pay off the iPhone 11 with the AirPods, with the Impala, with that, that house that you can't afford. So now you're bound, and you can't really take time off to really care for yourself or to do other things or to venture out. So a lot of people get caught up in that cycle. So
yeah, and I would agree. I tell people, I don't mind if you spend your money. I like nice things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she knows that I won't buy it if I can't afford it. And I tell people this, just because you can purchase something doesn't mean that you can afford it.
Exactly.
If you look back at that item that you purchased 3 months down the road and regret purchasing it because it's now costing you money and that you can't now afford, or you're looking at, man, I could have purchased this instead of this, then you could afford it from the very beginning. So as long as you put within your budget, like, okay, if you like Jordans, great. Then I know that I'm going to set $10 aside or $20 aside every month because this is what I want. So and by the 6th month, I can buy the latest Jordan or the latest phone. I tell people, my students say, well, why don't you have the latest, what iPhone are we on, 11? 11 XR.
You can't even keep track.
And I tell them, I said, I went, I love technology. I love nice things. I said, I went there, I held it, and I was like, whatever. I just don't want it. I said, I'll wait. And I would think the beginning of helping people with their mental health is getting their finances in order, either talking to a mental health therapist or talking to a financial therapist.
Exactly.
Put some things in perspective. And because like you said, those mental health days are extremely important. Getting away from everyone is very important. Just to have that moment to yourself where you can say, and you can recharge that battery. I think I wish more companies in the corporate world did that.
Yeah.
Allowed, hey, we're gonna allow you. You got sick leave and you got mental health days.
Yeah.
Because that's important.
Mm-hmm.
What's
Agreed.
another thing we was talking about? Oh, that's the last one, the last point you were making. You said scarcity, having the scarcity mindset versus the abundant mindset. I thought that was
Yeah.
powerful. Elaborate on that for me.
Yeah. Definitely. So the scarcity mindset is something that can be developed over a long period of time. Let's say from birth. Let's say you've always lived in poverty. So the way you view a dollar, you view it as something sacred, something that you need to hold on to. So as a result, you're not going to spend that money. And some people may see that as a strength, and I thought so too. So again, very recently I came across the need or the importance of having an abundance mindset because I had a very much a scarcity mindset. So here's an example. If you grow up in poverty and that's all you know, and you come across, let's say $1,000, right? Chances are you're going to hold on to that $1,000 for dear life, right? But if you have a mindset of abundance, one thing you may think of doing with that $1,000 is putting it into ETF, right? Or investing it in a basket of stocks. Or let's say you're in business. So let's say you're a therapist like myself, and let's say you come across $1,000. You may take that $1,000 and instead of holding on to it, because again, that's that scarcity mindset. Oh, I can't spend it. I got to hold on to it because I don't know when's the next time I have $1,000. Then I'm not going to use that money to put into marketing or use that money to rent a space to run my business, or I'm not going to use that money to develop a website because all these things are going to eventually bring in more money than that original $1,000. And that kind of goes with that idea of having a mindset of abundance. So the mindset of abundance is just that, the idea that I'm working as if I already have money. My basic needs are covered, and everything's going to be okay. Like I have a plenty to give. I come from a giving mindset. So when it comes across, or when I come across whether it's money or doing things for other people, I have no problem doing it for free, because at this point in time, I know that it may not bring me money, but it may connect me to the right people that's going to eventually bring me money down the line. But I think a better point goes to that idea of investing. And I think that's something that, again, a lot of communities, but especially the minority community, we don't do as well. But you see a lot of people come from other countries who come and they buy up a lot of property in South Florida. And you alluded to this in the conversation that we had earlier. If you look at how, the Jews are coming there, they're buying up a lot of property, and they're helping other members of their family to develop, portfolios, or whatever the case may be. It's because they operate from this mindset of abundance. They may put down money on an item knowing that at that point in time, they're not going to see a return, but they trust the fact that later down the line, in the long run, they're going to start to see some returns, and that's going to lead me to that financial freedom. So to give you another idea, let's say I have, I don't know, $10,000 to put down on a condo. Okay. I put that money down and now I have a condo that's costing me $900 a month for mortgage, but I'm lucky enough to rent it out for $1,200. So I have a profit of $300. Now I could do one or two things with that $300. I can put that $300 in a high saving interest account, such as Ally, right? Or, I could take that $300 and now I can afford to pay off, a liability such as a Mercedes, and that's probably what some people do. Like they decide, okay, this is where I want to be at. I have enough money to do this, or this is my end goal to have a Mercedes, and now I can pay it off without even worrying about it because my tenants are paying it off along with my property. But you can only get to that point once you have that mindset of abundance. So if you have that mindset of scarcity, you're gonna choke that dollar to death, literally. So if you had $2,000, or let's say someone had $2,000 back in 2008, that $2,000 is still $2,000. But if you took that $2,000 back in 2008 and put it in an ETF, that $2,000 probably would have been worth $4,000 now. But you got to have that mindset of abundance to do things like that, or to even understand that concept, and then that is going to alleviate that stress of not being able to, who knows, like pay for bills or to take days off from work.
Definitely. And that $2,000 isn't going to buy the same things that would have bought in 2008 and inflation.
Yes. Yes.
I definitely, one of the things that you were saying is, and I think it all stems from, when you have that scarcity mindset, you definitely have to, people have a fear of letting go. All right. As I said, once you understand money and the concept of money and currency, then you have to let go of money to make more money. But if you fear losing money, if you fear letting go money, you will never really make any money in your lifetime. Not the type of money that you want to make, because the type of money that you want to make is going to require you taking risk. And I can tell people, you're going to lose money.
Yes, it's a fact.
That's a fact. You're going to lose money when you invest. Whether you're investing in stocks, you're definitely going to lose money. But over time, you learn. I tell people that every time I invested in the stock, if I lost money, you begin to learn yourself a little bit more. You learn your habits. You learn to separate your emotion from money. A lot of people get too emotional and tied up in money, and in the long run, it ended up hurting you because you don't know how to let it go. And in order to invest, you have to separate that. When you make money, when you lose money, you just can't be so caught up in it emotionally. And I think that's the reason why we're going to go through this mental health, because we're so caught up in money. I don't care about money, but I know I need money, right?
Yes. Yes.
I'm not in love with it. But I know that I need it. And and when you know that you need it, you have to figure out, what do you want to purchase and buy with it? Because a lot of people say, oh, I want a lot of money. I want a lot of money. Okay, how much is a lot of money? What do you want to do with the money? If I put you on an island with $1 million and you couldn't spend it, would you want money?
Exactly.
Would you really want it? No, you wouldn't. So what do you really want? And once you begin to visualize those things that you want, then the money is going to come, because you're going to take those necessary steps to get what you want. And money's going to come that way.
Exactly. And I would even say, like, again, to your point, people aren't necessarily chasing money, or maybe even the things that they can buy with money, but it's that feeling that they get once they purchase those things or they do those things. So the feeling of being more confident because you're driving in a Mercedes. Okay, so you're looking to be more confident. It's not really the Mercedes. The Mercedes, literally, but also figuratively, the vehicle for you getting to that feeling of being more confident. People want to be able to visit Rome, Spain, which I do too. But it's that idea of seeing something that they never saw before. It's that idea of adventure, that idea of being relaxed and not worried about work. Well, okay, you could probably do that if you go to the Keys, or if you go to an area in South Florida that you've never been to. I mean, I definitely think we all want those things just because we personally want those things. But I think a lot of people are chasing that feeling that's attached to those things. So what you can do is you can literally skip over purchasing that object and try to figure out how can you get that feeling,
That's right.
What if you are a person that's, just busy, I'm going to work, I'm 9 to 5, and I never stop to really think about my mental health, and they hear this podcast and they begin to wonder, am I mentally healthy? How would a person know?
Yeah. Um, I think first it starts off by knowing who you are. So like that self-awareness piece, knowing like who you are naturally. And then by knowing who you are naturally, if you find yourself deviating from those norms, then you can start to realize that, okay, maybe something's a little bit off. So let's say you work a 9 to 5, and let's say you work with kids, and let's say, you have a good rapport with your kids, but lately you've been snapping on your kids, and that's not you, or you've been really short with your kids. Then you can ask yourself like, hey, like, what's going on? Maybe I'm not getting enough sleep at night, or maybe I'm skipping breakfast, or maybe it's the end of the year and I have an exam that I have to give to my students. So my students have to take a state assessment, and I know my evaluations are very highly attached to these assessments. So I may find myself getting a little bit more stressed than I normally am. So I think it's all about knowing who you are naturally, and then when you start to deviate from those norms. Even for myself, I know when I'm stressed once my weight hits a certain number. So like normally I'm under 210. So I'm 6'4", I'm a tall guy, but weight wise I'm normally under 210. So if I ever hit 215, or I never hit 220, but let's say I did hit 220, then I know that I'm not running, and I know I'm not eating healthy, and I know I'm probably out eating fast food. So I can do a little check-in with myself, like, hey, what's going on? Like, why am I at this unusual weight? Or why am I snapping at people that I love? Or why do I find myself agitated? I think at first you have to know who you are naturally, and then you have to be mindful. And that's a form of mindfulness, just doing mental check-ins. What is my body telling me? What are my emotions telling me? What are my thoughts telling me? And how does that differ from who I am?
You remind me your response. There was a moment my leg was ticking so fast up under my desk, and every time somebody knocked on my door, and every time my phone rang, I'm like, my leg is just ticking. And every time I heard Mrs. Clarington, I was just like, I felt the agitation, but I'm aware that I'm like, it's none of their fault, so I don't want to release this pent up, annoyed and irritated energy on, any of the students that I work with. So at lunchtime, I said, I need a moment. I have to pull back, because I realized that my equilibrium is all off, because things that shouldn't annoy me is annoying me. Every time that my phone rang, I'm like, oh my gosh. But I could just feel it building up in my body. So like at lunch, I just had to go in my closet and I just needed not to be bombarded by anyone. I needed that space away from all of the students that I work with and speak to, just to get myself together. So when you say that, like knowing yourself and being aware of when you feel off, being able to say, I gotta check that. What is that, and where is it coming from, so that I can do something about what it's doing, what it's doing to my body. Because if you don't, then you end up popping or blowing up. And
popping.
Yeah, I say that because I say popping. Let me say why I say popping. I say popping because a lot of times when I work with students and they're so full, and I said, have you ever blown up a balloon? And they're like, yes. And I say, well, if you keep putting air in it and you're never having any type of release, what will it eventually do? And they say pop. And I said, it's not good when people pop, When you pop, you losing it, you going off and possibly hurting the people around you or whatever. So
So my last question is this: what can people expect, Mr. Wells? I'm stressed. I've heard the podcast. I don't have money. I know I'm stressed about money. I'm stressed about kids. I'm stressed about work. What can they expect, and what should they do when they reach out to a therapist? How does the first session go? Or because people have anxiety about seeing people that they don't know and talking about their problems. So I'm calling you. What can I expect?
Yeah. So the first session, I always tell people, I'm an open book. I always ask them to tell them a little bit about myself, but I always start the conversation off by telling them a little bit about who I am, to try to model kind of like the expectations. And I tell them, I'm not going to judge you. I tell them, I'm not perfect, you're not perfect, but we're going to work together to try to strive for perfection, or to strive to be mentally fit, as I put it earlier. And in the first session is very similar to when you go to a doctor's office. You know, I'm gonna ask you some very simple questions like, hey, when's the last time you seen a doctor? Um, tell me about your family, or who's your emergency contact? How many siblings do you have? What do you do in your free time? It's a very simple conversation. We're not gonna cut you open and do anything, or analyze your brain. You know, it's nothing like that. It's just two people having a conversation, and that's what people should expect. And I always try to make myself very relatable, which is why I call myself the player's coach, because ideally I want to try to attract Black men. And I know a lot of Black men, they can relate to things like sports, specifically basketball. But I try to make myself very presentable, very personable, very personal as well. So it's a very light conversation during that first session. But if someone is listening to this podcast specifically because they're having anxiety about their finances, what I would do is I'll have them download a few apps that I use, such as Acorns. I'll talk to them a little bit about Ally. I'll talk to them about how they can use their rewards card in a beneficial way. Some people are afraid to use credit cards, but credit cards can actually be, especially rewards cards, they can be very beneficial if you use it right.
Yep.
And then, as you alluded to earlier, definitely the budgeting, knowing where their money is going. And then also, there's something that I do, which kind of ties into like the self-care piece. So every 2 weeks when I get paid, I have, just $40 going to a credit union, a whole separate card. And the sole purpose of that card is for self-care. Like I take that card, and I may go to a very nice restaurant, and I may go by myself, or I may use that card to go see a movie, or I may actually use that card to pay off, a flight to, let's say, Jamaica or Las Vegas or New Orleans. I really think that we should start investing into our mental health by doing little things like that. And if you notice, like all those things are automated, which I think is another concept or idea that people need to start getting into. The more automated you are with saving and investing, the easier it is to do. And then over time, it's going to build and build and build, and it's going to alleviate some of that stress, especially if you have a scarcity mindset. Because let's say you're living paycheck to paycheck, and then you get towed or you get a ticket. I mean, you're up the creek, man, and that's a lot of people's worst fear. And that's something that everybody can relate to. Everybody's been told or gotten a ticket, and it can be very, very annoying, nerve-wracking, furious, whatever you want to call it. So if I had someone, or someone is listening to this podcast, I definitely say, don't be afraid to spend money to see a therapist. Now, obviously, you want to do your research, but just like you go to a doctor, you have to pay a copay. You can go see a therapist and pay a copay. So your copay may be $25, it may be $40, whatever it is, but you need to trust that this is an investment. And again, if you have that scarcity mindset, the idea of investing in someone to talk to you is something that some people can't even fathom. They can't even comprehend, because they know they got to use that money for other things. But you should trust that I'm going to get you to a point that you're going to be able to live stress-free or anxiety-free, which is ultimately your goal. So again, skipping whatever it is and trying to get to that feeling that you want. That feeling that you want at the end of the day is to be calm, to be stress-free. And unfortunately, to a degree, you can't really put a price on that. You can't really put a price on a peace of mind. Yeah.
Hold on, run that back. Hold on. You can use your insurance for therapy?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
For real?
Yeah.
Look in the network, they tell you all the different doctors, and it covers like every arena of
listeners. Do better than me and pay attention to your insurance.
And you know what?
I was like, what?
Mr. Wells, like some people, they'll say, why would I pay someone just to talk to somebody? I could talk to so-and-so. I got somebody I could talk to, but everybody that we talk to can't necessarily help us.
That's a fact.
And or is trained enough to deal with heavy issues of depression. Matter of fact, a lot of times they end up saying things that might just make that worse. So just because you have some people that you talk to don't mean that they can necessarily assist you in what you're trying to navigate. That peace of mind is priceless.
Yeah. I would definitely say do your research when you are looking for a therapist, because so I'll give you an example. I'm a therapist, right? One thing that I work with, or one thing that I consider my niche, is irrational thoughts and behaviors. So if I have someone that's dealing with anger management, or someone that's dealing with anxiety or depression, things like that, those would be my ideal people. But if I had someone come in dealing with trauma from a rape, then that wouldn't really be my expertise, my level of expertise, even though I'm a therapist. So just like you can go see, a regular physician because you have something wrong with your skin, it may be better for you to see a dermatologist, So I would definitely say that not all therapists have the same niche. And I think that's what makes us different and unique in the field. So definitely do your research, and you can Google Psychology Today. Psychology Today is a website where you can find a therapist in your area, and then you can call them. A lot of them do what you call a free consultation. So you can speak to them about 10, 15 minutes, and you can ask them a bevy of questions to see if you're the right fit for them. So that's why I would ask them, like, hey, like, what is your niche? Or do you have experiences working with people with these type of issues? And if they don't, then they should refer you to someone that they know. Because just like I know, let's say I could probably name 20 therapists, all Black. Those other therapists can probably name a long list of other people that they can refer you to. So I think that's something that people need to do. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and feel free to say, you know what, I don't think this is the right fit. And do you know of someone else that can possibly be, a better fit for me, or someone that's experienced in this area?
That's great advice. That's great advice. I need to go see a therapist. I didn't even know. I can use my insurance for it. I don't know. Is there any last things that you would like to say as far as you would like to give the listeners?
Yeah. And I think you can actually appreciate this coming from an investor, but also a realtor, and then me as a therapist. So my last word of advice to anybody listening to this podcast. So if you didn't listen to anything, let's just say you just skipped through. The one thing I want to leave with you is the idea that growth and comfort cannot coexist. Growth and comfort cannot coexist.
Wow.
You have to choose one or the other. And a lot of times we do it unconsciously. A lot of times we wake up in the morning and we go straight to that snooze button because it's comfortable, or going with the finances. It's not comfortable saving for a house. It's not comfortable putting your money or your dollars in something that you can't see, and it's not comfortable going to therapy and trying new things or talking to someone about your feelings. That's something that's not comfortable for a lot of people. But if we desire to grow in different areas of our lives, such as financially or mentally, we're going to have to try to do certain things that we're not used to. We have to be willing to be uncomfortable in order to grow and to reach those desires that we truly want out of life. So if anyone's listening to this, I would say, hey, growth and comfort cannot coexist. So you have to decide which one you're going to sacrifice, because you can't have both. And I'll even say this, Denzel Washington still takes acting lessons. LeBron James still goes to basketball practice. Like, if they get comfortable by any means, then people like Giannis, Kevin Durant, or Michael B. Jordan, Will Smith, like, they're going to come and they're going to, take their spot. So they're constantly grinding, man. So that's also something that I think of to kind of keep me motivated.
Let's get your email, your website? Where can we find you?
You can find me on Instagram at The Players Coach LLC. You can find my website, theplayerscoach.net. Again, theplayerscoach.net. And then you can find my podcast called The Podcast. And you got to type it out as the acronym T.H.E podcast. And the acronym stands for Therapy Helps Everyone. And you can find that on SoundCloud and also Spotify.
That's great. I would definitely make sure I put all the information in the description so they can easily just click on those links and find you. But it was great having you on the Ultimate Freedom Podcast. This is, ladies and gentlemen, this is only part one, because I know we can definitely get a lot more information out of this guy.
Definitely.
Pleasure having you.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the conversation that I had with Mr. Philip Wells as much as my wife and I had. Also want to apologize we did have technical difficulties on my end with my mic being low. So please forgive me on that, and I'll make sure that won't happen again. Don't forget to check the description below to get all our information, and see you next time.
You've been listening to the Ultimate Freedom Podcast with Jamare Clarington. You can follow him at I Am J Clarington on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Download and follow the channel on the Podbean app to leave comments, receive exclusive information on upcoming shows and events. And while you're at it, check out IamJClarington.com for additional content. Thanks for tuning in. Good morning. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good evening. Good evening. And good night.